Welcome to another episode of Intentionality with Paul Kemp. Except for the fact that this is not another episode of Intentionality with Paul Kemp. I pitched an idea to you for a masterclass today on friendship.
Friendship is not an input, it's an output.
You see, this is why I asked you to be my co-host on this episode. It's the depth of these insights that you bring to the table.
If you are only giving, at some point that cup is going to run out.
I've not done a lot of teaching on IWPK.
I don't think there's a direct correlation between your personality type and the nature of your friendships. I think the nature of your friendships is a decision that you make around the output.
So today on this podcast and YouTube channel, we are going to do things very, very differently. And I'm going to call it the Intentionality Masterclass with Francois and Paul. You're listening to Intentionality with Paul Kemp. And on that note, a very warm welcome to my guest today, Francois de Wet.
Paul, what a privilege to be back here. Not on the famous blue couch, but nevertheless in a beautiful, beautiful studio. And I actually want to say something.
Yes.
You are saying that you weren't intentional about teaching, but as a follower, an avid follower of IWPK, and knowing many people who do follow and listen, there has been a lot of learning from our side listening to you. So even though the intention wasn't necessarily to teach, I think the content was so valuable that it forced, at least myself, to ask hard questions, to go and reflect, and then have some aha moments, and then end up with, I'm not there yet. And so I think there's a lot of teaching that's happening subconsciously and indirectly.
Francois, you're being too nice. And now I've got to be nice and give you a compliment back. But it's an easy one. Francois is our first repeat guest on Intentionality with Paul Kemp. We've done an episode many, many months ago in which I had a wonderful interview with Francois. And it was very intentional for me to get him back here and to be my co-host for this first masterclass that we're going to do. Now, Francois, you and I had a recent conversation where I pitched the idea to you. I said to you, I think we've got to try and focus on learning and teaching in this on this channel. And I pitched an idea to you for a masterclass today on friendship.
Yes.
Now, I think the most important thing we must tell the listeners right from the beginning is, I think one of the reasons we wanted to do this is because we are friends,
Yes.
number one, but more importantly, we're really both very passionate about this topic of friendship.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited for us to just throw around this topic today and see if there's something around friendship that we can teach the listeners.
Absolutely. You know, when you approached me with the idea, it was an immediate yes. An immediate yes for various reasons. I think firstly, the friendship that we've got, the similarity in the mindset, how intentional we try and live our lives. I'm sure we'll speak about it through the episode, but, we are very intentional about getting together, about making time to spend time together. And that has been a core foundation of our friendship. And so when you pitched this idea, it just resonated with me to spend time with you. But more importantly is to give that value back to the listeners. I always say, and I'm sure you feel the same, is, we don't know everything. We're not the textbook. But to share experiences, to share learning, and to be able to have it on a platform where multiple people can listen to it is just so cool for me, So thank you so much for inviting me.
No, it's a pleasure. I want to start off this conversation around a YouTube video. It's one that Mark Sham recommended in our episode when I asked him for a tip of the week. It's a YouTube video that featured Simon Sinek and Trevor Noah.
Yes.
And they spoke specifically about friendship.
Yeah.
And I found it so interesting because they actually said there's so little in terms of education around friendship.
Yeah.
In what it takes to be a friend and what it means to be a friend and just all of the different aspects of friendship. I'm sure you've watched the video.
I did.
Maybe you can start off by giving me your impressions of the things that they said and the things that they discussed there.
I was listening to it going in my head, if we can be so fluid like the two of them were, then 50% of this is done.
Absolutely.
But no, what an inspiring 24 minutes. I think what really struck me was friendship is not an input, it's an output. Friendship is something that is not about you. It's about the other individual. I think second to that is the deep personal experiences around the vulnerability the dependability, the trustworthiness. I think Simon actually said at some point when one of his friends finally told him he's going through a deep, dark place, he said, "You arsehole.
Yes.
Why are you not giving me the privilege of being there for you?" And I think, just reflecting on the episode, the difference between male and female, how easier it seems to come for women to be vulnerable, to be trustworthy, to share when it's not going well, and then allowing the other person to be there. Whereas, and let's not stereotype, but most men, are it's not as natural to do. And so again, for the men listening, hopefully this conversation can inspire some of that as well.
I'm glad you went there right at the beginning, because I've been thinking about a challenge that I want to throw out there.
Yeah.
And I want to throw this challenge out, not just to all men out there in terms of the friendships they have in their lives, but I want to throw it out there in particular for our groups of friends. Now, you and I know that we're part of a specific circle of friends around golf, something that we both enjoy.
Yes.
And this is going to be interesting to see how many of our friends, number one, listen to this masterclass, to this episode.
Yeah.
And then secondly, listen to this challenge that I want to throw out here. So bear with me. Here's the challenge. I do think it's easier for women. I do think they're able to be more vulnerable. I do think they're able to have deeper friendships.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I think it's especially for us Afrikaans men.
Yes.
Maybe it's got something to do with the way in which we grew up, the relationships we had with our fathers. But I want to share there something about how I see it. My dad was not a very physical guy. I still remember I always used to shake my dad's hand.
Yeah.
He never gave me a hug or anything like that.
Yeah.
So that's the way I grew up.
Yeah.
And for me, friendship was always, it's a handshake.
Yeah.
Then I met somebody, and you know this person as well. I think you know who I'm talking about. It's our friend Tony.
Yeah.
Our Italian friend.
Yes.
And from the day that I met him, he was a guy that,
Yeah.
what, the first time that Tony gave me a hug, I actually felt uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But it's been a 20-year friendship, and he's taught me the incredible power of just giving your friend a hug.
Yes.
And here's the challenge that I want to throw out there, and I really want to hear what you think about this. I want to see how many of our group of friends, especially our group of golf friends, have listened to this episode and is prepared to give me and you a hug when they see us again on Saturday.
I love that.
What do you think of that challenge?
I love it. On a serious note, as you're speaking, three things come to mind. So going back to, why I immediately said yes to join you is I think we are different ages representing potentially different generations.
Yes.
And I think those two perspectives can be valuable for a broader audience. Secondly, I grew up with the exact opposite. So to this day, and I'm 37, my dad and I kiss each other on the mouth. Okay, so that's how I grew up. Very affectionate, very loving, very hugging. And so for me, growing up, that was never uncomfortable. And that made me into being a highly physical individual, where since I can remember, I've been hugging my male friends. And I'll never forget when my mom died, you and I went for coffee. This was now 4 years ago. And you told me you're going to do something. You were preparing me for this.
Yes,
and
I remember that.
At the point we weren't that close, and you were like, don't get scared. And then you gave me what I would now call a slightly awkward hug.
Yes,
right.
Yes.
But in that moment, and I think this is pivotal to the conversation. In that moment, I felt loved, I felt comforted, and I felt like whatever barrier there was still between us was broken. And that was the power of that moment. Knowing that you, in my time of need, my mom passing away very suddenly during COVID, you were there. You drove through, you took me for coffee, we spoke, you hugged me. Talking about barriers and our golfing friends and reflecting back on the topic and listening to that YouTube video, I think often we say we're friends based on a certain set of criteria, but then other things are off limits, including a hug.
Yes.
And those other things, that's the depth required to actually carry you through the difficult times, or to be vulnerable, or to share when something is really awkward or wrong or embarrassing, which, if I think of some of my friends who I also hope will listen here, are not doing. Yeah.
Really great insights. And you're right, very different generations, very different ways of growing up around physicality.
Yeah.
But I must tell you, yes, that hug that you're referring to was an awkward one, but it's something that I've been kind of growing into, and it's something that I'm finding myself getting more and more comfortable with.
Yeah.
And it's actually an awesome feeling to be able to do that.
It's very freeing.
Yeah.
It's very freeing. It's open. It's opening up your heart. And a lot of it, and you know, when we deep dive into friendship and characteristics of friendship, a lot of giving a hug is allowing someone to see something about you, which again is triggering that vulnerability versus what am I deciding to show the world and my circle of friends, which in most cases can be very arrogant. Yeah.
I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, the FFG Group of Companies. Take another step into living a more intentional life by being more intentional with your finances and insurance. As a trusted provider of a wide range of financial services, the FFG Group offers innovative, tailored solutions that help companies and individuals thrive and flourish. They are an amazing company that I believe in because they embody intentionality in everything they do, and I'm proud to partner with them. FFG is an authorized financial services provider. Ready to take the next step? Click the link below and start making better, more intentional financial decisions, or visit their website. Remember, with FFG, you create the memories, we ensure the journey.
I want to explore a theory I have, and I would love to hear your insights on it, your wisdom on it. With your psychology background, I think you'd be able to provide insights to me on this theory I have that I think could be incredibly valuable for our audience. And the theory goes something like this. I think you have different types of friends in your life. I think there's different levels of friendship. And I want to illustrate it like this. I think first and foremost, there are people in your life that need you.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily lift you up.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily bring enormous value to the relationship. But these are people where you actually bring an enormous amount of value to their life. And I have met people in the past that try and avoid that kind of friendship. It's kind of like, if I don't get anything out of the relationship, why do I want to be friends with you?
Yeah.
But I think you need people like that in your life. So that's the first level of friendship. It's where you can lift somebody up, you can mean something to them. I find there's a certain amount of satisfaction in that type of friendship where you know you're actually making a difference in that person's life. I think the second type of friendship is the one where it's probably the most common friendship that we as men share, and that is just a fun relationship.
Yeah.
That is just somebody that you enjoy spending time with, you have a good time together, like our friends we have with the golf. But then you have a third level of friendship, and that is the friendship where somebody lifts you up, somebody inspires you, somebody challenges you. And often that third type of friendship is mutual.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes I need you, sometimes you need me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I can give you advice on something you're struggling with. Other times you would be giving me advice. But I kind of have this theory that you need all of those different type of friendships in your life. And I'd love to hear what you think about that theory.
It's a fantastic question and a theory, and I think, you know, to be perfectly honest, I'm going to disagree with the first one. I fundamentally believe that if you are only giving, right, for whatever the reason, and let's assume the intent is beautiful, help, guidance, upliftment, at some point that cup is going to run out. And so if you aren't getting input from somewhere else, then at some point you won't have anything left to give. And then I will question, what was your intent in the beginning? Was the intent then to feel satisfied when whatever the goal, the mission, or the problem was that you were trying to solve is solved? Was that then something back directed at you, accomplishment? Well done, Fran, you did it. You uplifted that human, or they're now in a better place. I wouldn't argue that we should not do that, but I wouldn't categorize that as a friend. That is someone in need, and depending on your religion, depending on your ethics, depending on how you view the world, being a good human would require you to do that. You and I both have the privilege of being leaders of an organization, of which certain employees aren't our friends, but we are doing that, or we have to do that in certain contexts.
Is that something like a mentorship type of
A
relationship?
mentorship, a financial, burden that you can uplift, an educational, course that you can send someone on, a lift that you can organize via an Uber. Like, that's just being kind. But I don't believe personally that constitutes a friendship that at least I would like in my life.
Good point. Yeah.
I've been very intentional around stripping away, the older I get, my circle of friends. I'm an extrovert. I like talking. I wouldn't call myself funny, but I have found myself being in the center of attention, and I like being in the center of attention, right? But inevitably then, when you're younger, let me speak for myself. When I was younger, I would have a big group of friends. And I then intentionally started evaluating those friendships around not what do I get from them, but are they allowing me to enrich their lives? And are they doing the same to me? And my wife and I, Ilana, always ask this question: are you prepared to let us in? Because if we decide that we want to go on a journey with you, we will let you in. So that's my comment on the first one. A second comment to that is, I like to think of those 3 examples as seasons that I would like to go through with people that I call my friends. So there is a season where I am stronger than you are and you need me. But then there's the exact same season where the opposite is true. As much as we can go deep around a glass of whiskey, I want to talk shit in Katu on the golf course with you, and then also argue with you when you miss a 2-foot putt for the win.
Yeah.
And because of the dynamic play that we've got, and the trust and the relationship and the foundation, the seasons of our friendship ebb and flow. And ultimately then that becomes memories of deep trust, deep connection, deep conversation, but also playing poker with a group that I dynamically can do that. It's easy for me in my life to go deep quickly because of who I am, what I studied, what I love about human and human behavior. But the older I get, sometimes I just want to be with you. Let's sit on the couch and watch the rugby, Let's go to the driving range and drink a beer. It doesn't have to be deep. But the ability to be both with you, as an example, that for me is friendship. Yeah.
Good point. Interesting you mentioned being an extrovert. I'm actually an introvert.
Yes.
Very much so when I was at school, when I was at university, when I was younger. And it's not necessarily something I'm trying to change, but it's certainly something that has affected my friendships.
Yeah.
And I think that introvert history, that introvert background of mine, maybe makes me view friendships in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have a lot of friends growing up. I had a good group of friends, but I didn't have a big group of friends.
Yeah.
And it's only been recently where I have really gone out of my way to try and be less of an introvert, where my circle of friends have grown a lot.
Yes.
But I still think I find myself in a place because of this background where I value every single friendship I have.
Why?
I even value the friendships I have that maybe I'm not getting as much out of the friendship as I'm giving. And you're asking the question why? I have no idea.
Yeah.
I don't want us to go into the psychological evaluation of my history.
Yes.
But maybe it's got something to do with insecurity around friendships. I don't know.
Yeah. Look, I think it's a very valid part of the conversation around the assumption that extroverts have more friends and introverts don't. If you go further down the rabbit hole, the introverts then tend to have less friends, but they go deeper. And the extroverts have more, and it's shallow, and it's party, and da. And I think there's nothing wrong about it. I think to the listeners, my opinion around having to be an extrovert to have more friends that's flawed. I don't think there's a direct correlation between your personality type and the nature of your friendships. I think the nature of your friendships is a decision that you make around the output, like Simon Sinek said. Where and in what context and in what crowd can I deliver that output? Because ultimately, I guess the next question that we should ask, and let me ask you that, is, what makes a good friend?
I love the fact that you're asking that, and I think it's an important part of the learning we're trying to create in this masterclass today. I think for me, a good friend, number one, is somebody that you can share bad news with.
Yes, I love that.
And they are there for you.
Yeah.
It's all about you.
Yeah.
Something has happened in your life, something is not right, and they don't come into that conversation, dismiss the bad news, and then it becomes all about them.
100%.
For me, a good friend is somebody that can realize, you know what, Francois, you need me today, I'm there for you today.
Yeah.
You just share your emotions, your feelings, and that's all we talk about today.
Yeah.
But secondly, a good friend for me is somebody that you can also share good news with.
Yes.
What I mean by that is sometimes there's something great happening in our life. There's something awesome in our life. And we want the spotlight to be on us. Not because things are bad, because actually things are good and we're excited about something.
Yeah.
And again, I think a good friend, a good friendship is somebody that can say, you know what, I'm glad for you.
Yeah.
Not 1 second jealous of what good news you've achieved or what's happened in your life. I'm excited for you. I'm excited with you and I can celebrate with you.
Love.
I think for me, that is two things in a friendship that I look for. Somebody that has those qualities that can do that for me.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a good starting point. Anything that you want to add?
Yeah, I think a good friend, to your point, is a container. A container that can hold whatever the context of the conversation, emotion, occasion is. So whether it's good news, whether it's bad news, whether it is jokes, whether it is I just want to have a jaw or watch the rugby, can you meet me where I'm at and can I meet you where you're at? Can we be a container for each other, accepting that it will never be the same? There's no expectations. I don't have to come and make it about me because I know. Because here's the thing, Paul. When people immediately make it about them, you mentioned the word insecurity earlier. It's because they're scared that they are not going to get a chance to get the light on them. So when you can release that to go, well, this container of ours is big enough for the both of us, then it's not a competition around where the light is shining, but just a beautiful container where it can ebb and flow depending on the context of where we're at now. Yeah.
I love it. That's a good description. I don't think we're finished. I think there's a couple of other things around what makes a good friend.
Absolutely.
And I want to refer to something that I've read very recently that I did share with you. It's a book called The Art of the Interesting. It was written by Lorraine Besser. And the one thing I want to specifically talk about in this book was the issue of psychological riches.
Sure.
Now, in this book, she talks about psychological richness comes from engaging in new and varied experiences, traveling to foreign places, reading books or having conversations that challenge your perspective, learning new skills and trying new things, and embracing spontaneity and playfulness. So these are 5 things that this writer, this author claims creates psychological richness. Here's why I bring it up. When I read that, to me, those 5 things are things I want in my life. It's things I want to do. But all of them are things I want to do with someone.
Yes.
I want to do it in a relationship with a spouse, but that's not quite enough.
Yeah.
I want to do it with something. These are things that I want to share with someone.
Yeah.
And to me, if you can think of these things and think of someone that you want to share this with, and experience this psychological richness with, to me, that's a friend.
100%. You know, I think as I'm listening to this, my mind goes to psychological safety, which is a buzzword at the moment a bit, but, you know, in the world of work, but I think even more so in the world of friendships. Is it psychologically safe? Second to that, I read an article where they said that when a friendship makes it past 7 years, you can be friends for life. Now, this might be a social media one-liner, or it might be a proper empirical study. I'm not too sure. But why is that significant? Because hopefully in the 7 years, both of you can look back at a lot of memories, shared experiences, traveling together. If I think of my friends, you know, there's trips to Croatia, there's matric dances. You know, my 2 eldest friends I met when I was 13. Well, not my oldest, we're the same age. The longest friendships I've had, we met when we were 13. I'm 37 now. So that's, 24 years. And there's matric dance, there's matric holiday, there's marriages, bachelor's parties, there's kids being born, there's death in families, there's cancer, there's New Year's parties. And reflecting back on all of that, you build up this incredible experiences together. And then, thank goodness, 2024 with the digital footprint we've got, you can reflect back on all of those photos or videos made. So I completely agree with those 5 and the psychological richness of not wanting to do this alone.
Yeah.
If I think of the Trevor Noah, they shared the story about being in Greece and the boat. What's the best boat is your friend's boat.
Yeah.
And it was so powerful what he
Yeah.
said. For those of you listening, go and check out that video. But it's phenomenal. The friend's boat thing is about. Trevor says it's layered. It's not just about the friend's boat and because he's going to have to pay for it, but the friend has a boat and he needs people to be on the boat.
Yes.
And that's the shared experiences in creating the memories. And so again, to the podcast, the masterclass's title, being intentional, is what are we doing as friends to create intentional memories, intentional experiences? My wife is a massive advocate for traditions. And at some point in the beginning of our marriage, it kind of irritated me a bit. Like, can we just move on? But she's got the strength, and I know your previous 2 episodes ago, you spoke about the Enneagram. So there's another assessment called the Strength Finder, and one of her strengths is context. So she likes to look back. One of my strengths is futuristic. So I want to look forward. And it's been beautiful to see how she's been pulling me back to look back. And then to get that feeling of we were there, we did that, let's do this again. We just put up the Christmas tree again. It's one of her things. Again, in November, we must put up the Christmas tree. And she showed me the last 6-7 years photos of putting up the Christmas tree. And it gave me that feeling of, wow, like the group of people I'm doing this with, I can see we're getting older. The next photo, there's a kid. The next photo, there's 2 dogs. The next photo, now we're pregnant. So it's psychologically richness with people.
Psychological richness, psychological safety with people.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the key. Just one thing about something you said there. Friends are supposed to help each other, and friends are not supposed to get each other in trouble. Now, I know you didn't realize this now, but you call yourself a friend, but you just got me into a lot of trouble with this Christmas tree story. You see, in our house, my wife loves a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
To her, a Christmas tree must be up the entire December.
Yeah.
I think she asked me the first time in October, can we put up the Christmas tree?
Yeah.
And what I've been doing is saying, let's leave the Christmas tree this year. It's not worth it because we're not at home at Christmas.
Yes.
We're
That's
somewhere
why she
else.
wants to put it up in October already.
Yes, we're going on holiday.
Yeah.
And so far, I've been winning the argument, and the Christmas tree isn't up yet.
Yeah.
Imagine my wife hears this conversation about your Christmas tree. I'm going to be in so much trouble.
Yes.
I think when I get home this weekend, I'm going to have to put up the Christmas tree.
You see,
Absolutely.
friends also inspire each other to change their
That's
behavior.
right.
So there you go.
Absolutely. So we've talked about what it takes to be a good friend. I did an episode a while ago. I think it was episode 37 where I spoke about how to not be an arrogant arsehole.
Yeah.
I think that's something that disqualifies you as a good friend.
Yes.
But I think there's more to it.
100%.
What do you think would... Oh, okay, sorry. Ek dacht jy sê stop. What do you think would disqualify you from being a good friend? Or what is it that stops a friendship?
One word: selfishness. I believe when it's all about you, the me, I get so irritated when let me share an example. So last week I was traveling in Cape Town and I met this individual, and this person couldn't stop talking about themselves. For 25 minutes. I hardly caught their name, and they were just ranting about themselves.
Yeah.
I always have this thing around, if I ask you a question, ask me a question back. It doesn't have to be the same question, but I measure the potential of an individual in my life in the way they ask a question. Okay? And so when it's selfish, when it's all about you, some individuals just find any conversation, they turn it around about themselves. And that stops not necessarily the friendship, but it stops the vulnerability, and in my opinion, in turn, the longevity of that friendship. Like, you might then be there for something that you can get, or because of someone else that wants you there, but you're not going to go deeper. So that's selfishness. What about you? Like, what do you think makes a bad friend?
I want to answer that question by actually remembering a book. Now, this is a very old book. It's one of the best sellers ever published.
Can I guess? I have no idea what you're going to say.
For it.
How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Book written by Dale Carnegie in 1936. And in this book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, he wrote a 300-page book that can be summed up in 5 words. Show interest in other people.
Sure.
It's as simple as that. And I think it's kind of exactly what you say.
Yeah,
When you are
spot on.
selfish, you just talk about yourself. The moment you turn that around and you show interest in other people, that's when you're a good friend. And I kind of like that idea of, if there's one thing you take from this episode, it's this. If you're a selfish person talking about yourself the whole time, you're a bad friend. The moment you show interest in other people, you are a good friend.
I want to throw a curveball in here because I believe that many listeners, consciously or subconsciously, might be doing this. You're not necessarily a bad friend, but you're missing out on being an exceptional friend if you govern the boundary of the friendship because you don't want to look in the mirror. Okay, so let me unpack that a bit. Often, and maybe back to the Afrikaans male generation, but probably not necessarily only confined to that space, but often we have a persona and a mask that firstly creates comfortability and safety for us. And we enter the world of work, of friendships, of whatever context and space you're in with this mask. And someone who's genuinely into wanting to care and be a good friend will pick up that there's this wall. Like, we can do this, but there I can't go. And if they genuinely care and the intent is correct and they love you, they would pick up that wall is there. And because of that wall, there is an element or a level of that friendship that is not explored yet. And I want to challenge listeners to really think about when this happens with you, because I believe you're missing out on psychological richness, which we spoke about earlier.
You see, this is why I asked you to be my co-host on this episode. It's the depth of these insights that you bring to the table. Thank you for that, Francois.
Yeah.
I want to add just one little thing. And maybe I'm going to make both of us a little bit vulnerable here.
Yeah.
We are both incredibly competitive people.
Yes.
We both hate losing.
Yes.
Especially when it comes to golf.
Yeah.
I mean, this is something where we have something of a rivalry.
Yes.
Every single Saturday, we have a competition against each other. There's a small wager on the line for that game. And I think there's a danger in that. I really do. I think if you are so competitive, if winning is so important to you, it is something that can threaten a relationship.
Yeah.
But there's a weird thing here. Despite this competitiveness, despite losing, I cannot remember once in all of the years that I've known you that for even 1 second I have felt a negative emotion towards you because you've just beaten me.
Yeah.
And I kind of get the feeling you feel the same
100%.
way. Can you unpack that? And this whole thing of competitiveness within friendship for us?
Yeah. Well, it's a fantastic comment. And I think, if I just take us as perspective and not try and, blanket statement this to whoever's listening and might have the same question. For me, it's about understanding our foundation, the richness and the depth of our friendship. And I mean, we haven't said this yet, right? So let me quickly say it. There's a big age gap. And when I say big, 13,
it's huge.
13 years, right?
15 years.
15 years.
Yes, 15 years.
You see how I made you younger than you actually are?
Yeah,
it's because you look so good. But since then, the intentionality around building our friendship has created this incredible depth and foundation and this richness. And we've shared, to our point earlier, so many memories in the last couple of years. That 100 Rand that we play for is nothing in comparison to what we do have. And so for me, I would never want to do anything to jeopardize that because that means so much to me. You inspire me so much. I look up to you in so many areas. And I'm not just saying this because we're on camera. I've said this to you offline.
Yeah.
But I also know that every now and again when we have coffee, you ask me a question. And so there's this reciprocal, beautiful, dynamic relationship that we've got, that competitiveness has got no room to destroy this. In fact, I think we both, without having to say it, we both view that as a playfulness part of our friendship. And for the listeners out there, when Paul and I play together in Katu as teams, we never win.
Yes.
So
But we're
no,
going to change that.
We're
this
going to
year.
change that
We're
this
gonna
year.
change
But
that.
yeah, I think to answer your question, I think when you understand the value of what you do have, and you have the perspective of how short life is. Part of that article I read is on your deathbed, reflecting back on your life. So often those themes, friendship is right at the top. And so to jeopardize that with something silly like competitiveness, I just believe is not worth it.
So 2 last comments on what you have just said there. There was a percentage that I was looking for that I can't remember.
5%.
It was 5%, yeah.
Yes.
People on their when they look back at their life and they look back at the biggest regrets, it's always about relationships.
Yes.
It's always about friendships. And then the second thing, I'm so glad you feel that way about our competitiveness, because I'm so happy to hear that you're not going to be angry at me for beating you at K2 this year.
Amazing. You know what, Paul? There was an 85-year-long study conducted, and the results were recently published around what is the number one predictor of happiness.
That's the stat I was looking for. You're quite right, yes.
And by a landslide, the answer was relationships,
Yes.
Being connected. And so the inverse of that is if I don't have those relationships, i.e. friendships, in whatever context, your spouse. But, to Simon and Trevor's comment earlier, we must be very careful not to burden one individual with everything that we need. And that's why these multiple friendships in different seasons, going through different seasons, are so important for everybody involved. But yeah, looking back, regretting friendships and not being connected. I mean, people live longer who are more connected.
That's right.
They live longer. They have less risk to disease, to heart attacks. I mean, there's a direct correlation with health. How often do you hear people retiring early and then just not having a purpose? And that is not actually the real truth, not being connected.
Yes.
And then just die.
Love it. I think that's such a powerful point to end this masterclass on. I think if our production team allowed us, we could go on for the next 3 hours.
100%.
But obviously somewhere we've got to stop. We're running out of studio time.
Yeah.
Francois, I am so happy that I made the decision to get you in to talk about this topic.
Yeah.
I loved every moment we spent together. I'm hoping that this is something we can replicate in the future, that this is something we can do on a more regular basis.
Absolutely.
That we can find other topics that we can talk about and maybe, just maybe, share something with the listeners, with the viewers that could be of value to them. Thank you for today.
It's been such a privilege. Thank you for inviting me. And yeah, I mean, if the audience loves this, if we get great feedback, if we can inspire at least one friendship that's on the verge of breaking up, if there's someone listening going, you're going to fire that friend right now, hopefully we inspired you to think about this from your friend's perspective and not yours. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, and I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching Intentionality with Paul Kempf. Subscribe, like, and click that bell to get notified when we release more episodes on how to live a life of intention and purpose.